It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I was at home drinking coffee when my mom called, asking me to stop by the house. Her voice sounded normal, so I didn't think much of it. I hadn't seen my parents in weeks because work had been crazy, and I missed them. When I walked in, everything looked the same. The smell of Dad's favorite aftershave, Mom's garden flowers by the window, and the family photos lining the hallway. It felt warm, familiar, until it didn't. They were sitting at the dining table, both looking serious. My sister Haley was already there, smiling in that polite way she always did when she was about to say something I wouldn't like. Mom started talking about how they'd been organizing some important family matters. I thought it was about retirement or health insurance or something small. But then Dad said, almost too calmly, "We've transferred the house and our assets into Haley's name. It's just for convenience, sweetheart." I froze. The words didn't make sense at first. I blinked a few times, trying to process what I'd heard. "Wait, everything?" I asked. Mom nodded like it was nothing, as if she'd just told me dinner was ready. Haley's smile grew tighter. They tried to explain it, something about simplifying paperwork, making it easier for them to manage things. But all I could hear was that everything my parents had built, everything we'd shared as a family, now legally belonged to my sister. No discussion. No warning. No trust. I sat there, staring at them. My chest felt heavy, my throat dry. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but none of them made it past my lips. My dad reached across the table and said, "We'll make sure you're taken care of too, Liv." But I didn't want to be taken care of. I wanted to be treated fairly. I wanted to be seen as their daughter, not the one left out. Haley stayed quiet, pretending to be humble, but I could see it in her eyes. She'd known about this all along. She didn't even try to act surprised. When I asked her if she thought this was right, she said softly, "Mom and Dad just trust me to handle things better. You know how emotional you can get sometimes." That sentence hit harder than anything else. The room suddenly felt cold. My parents looked at me with the same calm faces they'd always had when I was a child, and they were trying to teach me a lesson. But this time, it wasn't a lesson. It was a betrayal. I left soon after, walking out before my tears could fall. The world outside looked the same, but everything inside me had changed. I kept replaying their words in my head, for convenience. How easily they said it, how quickly they handed away my place in the family. That one word burned itself into me, and I knew things would never be the same again. Dad's retirement was supposed to be a happy time for all of us. He had worked for more than 30 years running his small construction business, and I thought we were gathering to celebrate that chapter of his life. When Mom called me and said they wanted a family meeting, I imagined we'd talk about his plans, maybe travel, or what to do with the business now that he was stepping back. I even brought a small cake, thinking it would be a light-hearted family evening. But the air in the room that day was heavy. Haley was already seated beside Dad, her hand resting on a neat folder full of papers. Mom looked calm but distant, like her mind was somewhere else. Dad cleared his throat and started talking about how proud he was of us, how he wanted to make sure the family was secure in the future. I smiled, nodding, waiting for the part where he'd tell us his next steps. But what came next took that smile right off my face. He said, "We've decided to put everything under Haley's name. The business, the house, the accounts. It'll just be easier this way." I actually laughed. I thought it was one of his jokes. But no one else was laughing. Haley just looked down, hiding a small smirk, and Mom avoided my eyes. I asked, "Wait, what do you mean everything?" Dad opened the folder, pulled out a few documents, and handed them to me. My heart dropped when I saw the official seals, the signatures, and the words property transfer. It was real. I looked at them both, trying to understand. "You did this without telling me?" I asked quietly. Mom sighed and said, "It's for the best, Olivia. You'll understand one day." Her voice was gentle, but it felt like a knife. I wanted to shout, to ask why Haley was the only one they trusted, but I couldn't even find the words. I just stood there, holding the papers, feeling my hands shake. Haley finally spoke, pretending to sound kind. "Liv, it's not what you think. They just want things organized. I'll make sure everything's fair." The way she said it, slow, calm, rehearsed, made it worse. It wasn't about fairness. It was about control. Dad patted my shoulder and said something about how he was getting older and needed someone responsible to handle things. Responsible. That word hurt almost as much as for convenience. I'd worked just as hard, built my own life, made my own way. But none of that mattered. They had already made their choice. I left that night without touching the cake I brought. As I drove home, I kept seeing those signed papers in my head. The proof that everything I grew up around now legally belonged to someone else. And not just anyone, my own sister. It wasn't just property or money. It was years of trust, handed away like I didn't exist. That was the moment something inside me quietly broke. The days after that meeting felt like living in a different world. Everything looked the same. The house, the furniture, even the smell of Mom's cooking. But the atmosphere had completely changed. Haley walked around like she owned every inch of it. She gave instructions to the gardener, moved furniture without asking, and even told Mom what colors to repaint the walls. She started referring to the house as my place, not our home. Every time she said it, something inside me tightened. At first, I tried to stay calm. I helped out with small things, hoping we could still act like a family. But the way they treated me made that impossible. Mom started saying things like, "You should learn from your sister, Olivia. She's so organized." Dad barely spoke to me, except to ask if I'd found a new job or if I was doing okay. There was a quiet distance in his tone, like he was already saying goodbye. It felt like they saw me as a visitor instead of their daughter. Haley's confidence grew with each passing day. She'd talk to me as if she were doing me a favor by letting me stay in the house. Once I was sitting on the porch, and she came out holding a folder. "I'll be renting the upstairs room to one of my friends," she said casually. "You'll need to move your things out of there by the weekend." That was my old room, the one I'd grown up in, the one where I'd written my college essays and hung posters on the wall. I stared at her, speechless. Mom didn't say anything. She just pretended not to hear the conversation. That silence hurt more than words. I realized then that I had no place left in that house, not even a corner to call mine. The walls that once held laughter now held tension and distance. Every time I tried to talk to Mom or Dad, they changed the subject. It was as if my feelings were inconvenient, like a mess they didn't want to clean up. One evening, I came home from work to find Haley hosting a dinner with some of her business friends. My parents were there too, smiling proudly as she talked about her company. When I walked in, Haley introduced me as her younger sister visiting for a bit. I felt a wave of shame and anger rush through me. Visiting. In my own family home. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, looking around the room that no longer felt like mine. I thought about every memory, every fight, every laugh we'd shared under that roof. Then I quietly started packing my clothes into a small suitcase. No one came to check on me. No one asked where I was going. When I closed the front door behind me, I didn't cry. There were no goodbyes, no dramatic scene. Just the sound of the latch clicking, soft, final, and cold. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone, but deep down, I also knew this silence was the beginning of something I hadn't discovered yet, my own strength. When I left home, I didn't have a plan, just a suitcase, a few $100s, and a quiet determination not to fall apart. I drove for hours with no real destination in mind until I reached a small town in Oregon. It was peaceful, surrounded by trees and rain that never seemed to stop. I found a small room above a diner, the kind of place where you could hear the wind whistle through the cracks in the window at night. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first few months were hard. I took 2 jobs, one at the diner downstairs and another cleaning offices in the evening. I woke up before sunrise and came back after midnight most days, exhausted but proud that I was standing on my own feet. There were days when my hands ached from scrubbing and my back hurt from carrying boxes, but each paycheck felt like a small piece of freedom. I started saving every dollar I could. I didn't buy new clothes or go out. I cooked simple meals and learned to live with less. For the first time in my life, I didn't rely on anyone. No one's name was on my bills. No one could take away what I earned. Slowly, that independence became my peace. A year later, I rented a small apartment with white walls and big windows. It had no fancy furniture, but it was clean and bright. I bought a used desk, put a small plant by the window, and told myself this was my new beginning. On weekends, I'd walk to the park, sit by the water, and think about everything that had happened. The pain was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. I was healing piece by piece. Over time, I started taking online classes in bookkeeping. Numbers always made sense to me. They were honest, predictable, unlike people. Eventually, I got a job at a local hardware store managing their accounts. The owner, Mr. Cooper, was kind but straightforward. He trusted me quickly, and for the first time, Someone valued my work without comparing me to anyone else. Years went by quietly. I built a small life, not rich, not grand, but mine. I even started smiling more. The anger I once carried began to fade, replaced by calm determination. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I was free from their control, and that alone was worth everything. Then one rainy afternoon, I came home from work to find an envelope slipped under my door. The handwriting on it was familiar, careful, looping letters I hadn't seen in years. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the name on the back, Haley Grant. For a moment, I just stared at it, frozen. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it over. After all those years of silence, after all the pain and distance, she had found me. I didn't know what the letter contained, but deep down I knew one thing. It was going to change everything again. When I finally opened Haley's letter, I read it twice to make sure I understood. Her words were polite but desperate. She wrote that the business was falling apart, clients were leaving, debts were piling up, and Dad's health was getting worse. She said Mom was worried and didn't know what to do. At the end, she asked if I could come home, just for a little while. For days, I left the letter on my desk, unsure what to do. A part of me wanted to throw it away. After everything they did, after all the silence and betrayal, they suddenly needed me. But another part of me, the part that still cared, even after all the pain, couldn't stop thinking about them. No matter how much I wanted to forget, they were still my family. One evening, after work, I packed a small bag. I told myself it would only be for a few days. The drive back to my hometown felt strange. The roads looked familiar, but everything else felt distant, like a memory I wasn't sure was real anymore. As I got closer to the house, my heart began to race. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was how different everything looked. The paint on the porch was chipped, the garden was overgrown, and the house itself looked tired, like it had aged with the people inside. I stood there for a moment before knocking on the door. Haley opened it. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked thinner, her face pale and tired. When she finally smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. "Liv," she said softly, pulling me into a quick hug. It felt awkward, forced, like two strangers pretending to be sisters. Inside, the house was quiet. Mom sat in the living room, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked smaller than I remembered. Dad was lying on the couch, a blanket covering his legs, his face pale but still trying to smile when he saw me. "You came," he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. We sat together for a while, the silence heavy between us. Haley tried to explain everything. The business was losing money fast, suppliers had stopped trusting her, and taxes were overdue. She spoke fast, nervous, her voice cracking every few words. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she said finally. "You're good with numbers, and I can't do this alone." Her words caught me off guard. I wanted to feel angry, wanted to remind her of what she'd done, but all I could see was how broken everything had become. The house, our family, even her confidence. I stayed quiet, watching her fidget with her hands. That night, as I lay in my old room, I couldn't sleep. The walls were still the same, but the warmth was gone. I didn't know if I was there to help, or to finally face what they'd done. Either way, I knew something inside this house was waiting to be uncovered. The next few days were heavy and quiet. Dad's health had gotten worse, so I spent most of my time sitting by his bedside, sorting through his business papers to help him organize everything. There were boxes full of old documents, contracts, and receipts. Some were dusty, others carefully labeled in Haley's handwriting. She said she had kept everything in order. But when I opened those files, I noticed a few things that didn't make sense. I started going through the folders one by one, making notes of what was missing. At first, it was small, a few misplaced invoices, some odd payments, and contracts signed under Haley's name instead of Dad's. But then I found a folder marked Personal Legal tucked at the bottom of the box. Inside were letters and documents from years ago, around the time they transferred everything to her name. My hands started to shake as I read the contents. There were emails Haley had sent to the family lawyer. In them, she told him to move quickly with the transfer because, according to her, I was unstable and financially reckless. She claimed I had unpaid debts, that I was bad with money, and that giving me control over anything could jeopardize the family's security. I sat there, frozen, reading line after line of her lies. She had painted me as someone completely different, irresponsible, careless, even dangerous with finances. The lawyer's replies were formal and polite, confirming that everything had been approved as per Mr. and Mrs. Grant's instructions. My heart sank. They had believed her. My own parents had trusted her words without ever asking me. I could almost hear their voices from that day. It's just for convenience, Olivia. Now I understood what convenience really meant. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the papers spread across the table. It all made sense now. Why they looked at me differently, why they treated me like I had done something wrong. Haley had fed them lies, and they had built a wall of mistrust between us. And she had gotten everything she wanted. That night, I couldn't eat or sleep. I sat alone in the kitchen, the papers still in my hand, the truth echoing in my head. For years, I blamed myself for not being enough, for somehow disappointing them. But it wasn't me. It was her. She had stolen not just money or property. She had stolen my parents' faith in me. Something inside me shifted that night. The pain that once made me weak turned into something cold and steady. I didn't raise my voice or plan to confront her immediately. I just knew I couldn't let her keep what she took through lies. I looked at the pile of documents again, and a quiet thought crossed my mind. If she used her intelligence to take everything from me, I would use mine to take it all back. That was the moment my revenge began, not with anger or shouting, but with calm, silent resolve. I would make her see what betrayal truly costs. I told Haley I would help because she asked and because I needed to be close to the truth. She looked relieved and grateful. She handed me a stack of files, gave me the passwords to the business accounts, and said I could reorganize things however I thought best. She wanted results fast, so she trusted quick fixes more than questions. That was my opening. I started by making a clear list of every account, every vendor, and every monthly bill. I created simple spreadsheets that showed money coming in and money going out. I checked bank statements line by line and matched each one to an invoice. When something didn't match, I flagged it. I kept careful notes with dates and names next to every entry. It seemed boring at first, but it built a map of how money moved through the company. Next, I met with the accountant and a few key suppliers, under the pretense of learning the ropes. I asked straightforward questions and took careful notes. Suppliers told me who had been late on payments and which invoices were missing. The accountant showed me recent tax filings and explained where cash had been diverted or delayed. I did not accuse anyone. I listened and wrote everything down. At the office, I started fixing small but important problems. I updated payroll, so employees were paid on time. I reorganized invoices so clients could actually see what they owed. I called a few longtime customers and apologized for the confusion, promising better service. Those calls brought quick returns. People trusted the company again because someone was finally paying attention to details. Behind the scenes, I made copies of all the documents I touched. I scanned contracts, saved emails, and printed bank activity. I labeled each file and kept a private folder separate from the company files. I wanted clear proof of what I was seeing, not rumors or memory. The more I collected, the clearer the pattern became. Small leaks here, unexplained payments there, patterns that showed the company had been run carelessly. I also tightened internal controls. I changed how approvals worked so no single person could move big sums alone. I introduced simple checks, 2 signatures for large payments, clear purchase orders, and a log of who accessed key accounts. I explained these changes as standard housekeeping to keep the business healthy. Haley agreed because she was desperate for stability and happy to look competent in front of our parents. Slowly, the business started to breathe again. Cash flow improved. Vendors stopped threatening to cut supplies. People at the office looked less worried. Haley took the credit in front of our parents and clients. She praised my quick thinking when she wanted to. I let her. That praise made her comfortable and careless. All the while, my private folder grew. Each note, each scanned invoice, each recorded call was a quiet piece of the truth. I wasn't planning a public scene. I was building an undeniable record. I wanted facts, not drama. With facts, I could change the balance of power without shouting. With facts, I could make sure what happened next would be based on proof, not emotions. The next few months passed quickly. I worked quietly, keeping my focus on the business. The more I fixed, the clearer the numbers became. For the first time in years, the company was making a steady profit again. Clients started returning, suppliers trusted us again, and employees began smiling at work. Haley proudly took credit for it all, telling everyone how she had turned things around. I didn't correct her. I wanted her to feel safe, to believe everything was under her control. Behind that calm surface, I was moving carefully. During my review of the accounts, I noticed that Haley had taken several personal loans from the company. They were small at first, but they added up to a large amount. She had never paid any of them back. I checked with our accountant, and sure enough, the records showed those loans were still open, unpaid and fully documented. Legally, they could be claimed as debts. That discovery became the quiet start of my plan. Using my savings and a few smart investments, I began buying up the small debts Haley owed to suppliers and local lenders. Some of them were more than happy to sell those debts at a lower price, just to get their money back. Within weeks, I legally owned a large portion of what Haley owed, both personally and through the business. She didn't notice because everything still looked normal on paper. I also restructured some of the company's ownership documents. Haley had signed several agreements without reading them carefully, trusting me to handle the details. Each time, I made sure the papers followed legal guidelines, transparent, proper, and fair, but they gradually transferred her control to me through the debt she owed. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden. Just numbers, contracts, and signatures that spoke for themselves. By the time the company became fully stable, Haley had no idea she was no longer its owner. The final step came when I called for a financial audit, something she agreed to because she thought it would make her look responsible to our parents. When the audit results came in, they showed a complete transfer of ownership. The company, its assets, and its accounts were all under my name. Haley's face went pale when she saw the documents. She flipped through them again and again, her voice shaking as she said, "This can't be right." But it was. Every signature, every payment, every legal transfer was valid. Her name wasn't on anything anymore. My parents called me soon after, begging me to make peace. They said family should forgive, that we shouldn't fight over money. I listened quietly, but I didn't agree. This wasn't about money anymore, it was about truth. For years, they believed her lies and let me walk away with nothing. Now, for the first time, the truth was written clearly in ink, just like her betrayal once was. When Haley came to me later, crying and asking why I did it, I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "You taught me how this works." She had used deceit to take what wasn't hers. I used patience and law to take back what was mine. I didn't want revenge anymore. I just wanted justice, quiet, precise, and final. When everything was finally settled, I went back to the house, the same house where it all started. It looked smaller than I remembered, quieter too. The walls still held the same family pictures, but they felt like ghosts of another life. Haley was sitting on the couch when I walked in, her face pale and tired. She had been waiting for me. I didn't say much. I just sat across from her, the coffee table between us. It was the same place where years ago, I had been told that everything, the house, the business, the money, had been given to her for convenience. Back then, I had nothing. Now it was different. I opened my folder and placed the new documents on the table. The papers clearly showed every legal transfer, every signature, every right that now belonged to me. My name was printed across everything she once called hers. Haley's eyes moved quickly over the pages. At first, she looked confused. Then realization hit her. Her hands trembled as she flipped through each page, her breathing quick and uneven. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "You can't do this." I stayed calm. "It's already done," I said quietly. "Everything you built on lies now belongs to me by law." She looked at me then, her eyes red, full of anger and disbelief. "Why live?" she asked, her voice breaking. "We're sisters. Why would you do this to me?" I looked right at her, not with hate but with truth. "Because you taught me how to take what isn't offered," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was heavy. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance, restoring what she had stolen with lies. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she tried to explain, saying she never meant for things to go that far, that she only wanted to feel trusted and loved by our parents. But her words didn't change the past. Trust can't survive on lies. She had chosen to destroy me to feel powerful, and now she was sitting in the ruins of her own making. After a long silence, she asked, "What are you going to do now?" "I'm not here to destroy you," I said softly. "I just came to show you the truth, and to end this chapter." She kept crying, holding the papers close like she could change what they said just by touching them. Mom and Dad weren't there. I had chosen a time when the house would be empty. This moment wasn't about them. It was between us, the two sisters who had once shared everything and then lost it all to greed and pride. I stood up, looked around the room one last time, and said, You could have had all this with me, not against me. Then I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was sitting behind me on that couch, holding papers that proved what betrayal costs. As I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done with the lies, the pain, the pretending. Justice had finally spoken, and it didn't need to shout. I left the house that day without looking back. The air was cool, the sky calm, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't known I was missing: peace. There was no anger left inside me, no need to explain or justify anything. What had been broken could never be the same, but I had finally learned to let it go. The house, the money, the business, none of it mattered anymore. I had rebuilt myself from nothing, and that was something no one could ever take away again. Months passed quietly. I focused on work, growing the company, turning it into something honest, something built with integrity. I hired good people, treated them fairly, and made sure no one ever felt the kind of betrayal I had felt. Every success reminded me that my strength had never come from wealth or family approval. It had always been inside me. Then one morning, a letter arrived. The envelope had my father's handwriting. My heart sank as I opened it. I already knew what it meant. He was gone. The man who once believed lies over his own daughter had passed away. But when I unfolded the letter, tears filled my eyes before I could even finish reading. He had written, "We were wrong about you, Olivia. You were always the strong one." It was short, but it was everything I had ever needed to hear. All the years of pain, of trying to prove my worth, suddenly made sense. I framed that letter and placed it on the wall of my office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes life gives us closure in small, quiet ways. Haley never reached out again. I heard through a distant cousin that she had moved to another state, trying to start over. I didn't feel hatred toward her anymore, only sadness. She had chosen greed over love, and it had cost her everything. I wished her peace, the same way I had finally found mine. My mother called once after the funeral. Her voice was soft, almost uncertain. She said she missed me, and for the first time, I believed she meant it. I told her I was doing well. We didn't talk about the past. There was no point. Some things are better left where they belong. Years later, when I walked into my office every morning and saw that letter framed behind my desk, it reminded me how far I had come. I didn't win by taking something back. I won by becoming someone better. The sweetest kind of revenge wasn't about hurting those who hurt me. It was about living a life so full, so steady, that they could never reach me again. That's the truth I carry now. Peace isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes the best way to heal from betrayal is to rise so high that forgiveness becomes your victory.